Nvidia just announced $100 billion of investment into OpenAI. It is a historically large number.
Jensen, Nvidia is making a $100 billion investment in OpenAI and working together to build out, I think you're saying, 10 gigawatts of capacity over several years. The investment's going to come with the gigawatts, one at a time.
This is the biggest AI infrastructure project in history. This is the largest computing project in history.
From the moment I opened my phone and saw the string of text coming in, my X feed blowing up, it felt like the same sentiment was ringing true everywhere. Holy cow, this number is ungodly large. The deal terms feel opaque at best, if not a little sketchy. And 3, is this just proof that the AI bubble is as big as ever and just about to pop? And in this time, I actually want to take the exact opposite approach, which is I read this and immediately it just was reminded Jensen and Sam Altman are the deal makers of my generation who are incredibly rational actors. And on behalf of their companies, this was a masterstroke in negotiating according to their strengths and weaknesses. As well, I think the other part that I always want to do in this kind of a podcast is, let's not end there. What does that mean for you, me, and the rest of Americans? Especially around, does this help us win the AI arms race with China? Or 10 gigawatts of energy? That's right now. That is 2% of the entire country's energy grid. It's ludicrous. We don't have 50 gigawatts of energy across the entire AI and data server industry writ large. Those are big questions. So let me dive in and quite literally address the news story, not just with the terms of the deal, but with the exact perspective of those two geniuses, Jensen and Sam. At surface level, if you read the headline, it is, whoa, sketchy. Nvidia, $100 billion investment into OpenAI. OpenAI doesn't even open the wire. They send it right back to buy $100 billion worth of Nvidia's chips. Without parsing that in an unnecessary amount of detail, let me get right into what hand, if we're using the poker metaphor, does Sam Altman have right now? And it is that he, like every startup founder, has a never-ending number of existential issues to get over. In my case, beating the big competitors means that, okay, they do $100 million in revenue, have a 15% profit margin, are old, decently run. Okay, we can come up against that. In his case, Sam is coming up against Meta, Google, Microsoft, Apple, Amazon, Elon. Each of the big tech players right now average $100 billion per year in profit, not revenue, profit. And have, for the first time in history, committed the lion's share, if not the entirety of that profit margin, towards what is called like CapEx, capital expenditure, or R&D expense into AI compute. And it's called like inference and like model training, all the way down to the data warehousing, the energy, to compete against $100 billion commitments annually. If it weren't Sam, I would call it quantitatively impossible. just not even worth. Like, don't even get in the arena. Stay out of the ring. It's impossible. So really, of the genius that Sam needs a lot of credit for, yes, he's built a world-class team. Yes, he's a brilliant PR guru, but he somehow has found a way to get a first mover's advantage and lead and preserve it, especially on the consumer segment, via, once again, a master class in fundraising. It just says here, March, that's 5 months ago. 6 months ago, he announced the largest ever private market investment, $40 billion from SoftBank, the only other like VC that's big enough to write that kind of crazy check. But think 40 billion, that's a dent in the $100 billion each that the big tech players are spinning off into this kind of investment. What's he done since then? A $500 billion, in theory, but it's convoluted, Stargate collaboration, a $300 billion data warehousing deal from Oracle and Larry Ellison, and now this $100 billion deal. So note, quite literally, $100 billion from OpenAI is pound for pound. It's him actually competing in that $100 billion like tier with the big tech players. Except the big tech players, they don't need to raise it. They don't need to take out the debt. It just so happens that each of them have debatably the most profitable businesses that are funding this. Most profitable businesses in history. Google with search, Meta with social media and ads, Elon with a lot, I don't know how many, a dozen different businesses he owns. But what makes it truly brilliant is that each of those founders and CEOs are actively courting Jensen Huang for the limited supply of the top tier chips that they're putting out every year. I feel like every time I read the next news story, it's Tim Cook taking Jensen out to dinner, Larry Ellison taking Jensen out to dinner, trying to schmooze the guy so they get an upper hand on the limited supply of, in this case, it was H100s, 200s. The new line that they're announcing next year is the exact line that Sam Altman just negotiated in that he has first access to. And this comes at a time where Elon is making waves for building out the largest, what are called super clusters. It's when you put all of the chips together and kind of tie them up so they can work in cohesion. Elon got all the accolades for a 0.25 gigawatt cluster called Colossus. The story of how he did it is super Elon. It's basically no one slept for 4 months. They seemingly defied the laws of physics and batteries and battery cooling, and they pulled it off in a way that only Elon could. But that's a quarter of a gigawatt. The next one that they just announced also was unthinkable, a 1.2 gigawatt build out. What Sam just did a press release on, 10 gigawatts. Like that, it's quite literally an order of magnitude bigger. It's so crazy. That helps preserve OpenAI's credibility with investors that they can compete. It gives him right of first access to each of the state-of-the-art chips for seemingly the next 3 to 5 years, and all just by giving up equity at most likely this really high water mark, $500 billion valuation. So for Sam, once again, it's intelligent. It's practical because, as crazy as it sounds, his $40 billion investment that he raised in March still has him the little guy on the basketball court trying to square up with the NBA's biggest. This helps him level up. Kind of a masterstroke. Now let's go to the Jensen side of the ledger because, gosh, this guy's a baller. Every time that I'm like, oh, I don't think I could afford to pay this multiple or this price for his shares, he pulls something like this that's, assuming it all gets cleared and it doesn't cause any kind of legal red flags, it's genius. Genius. Let's just walk through. For Jensen, he has debatably the highest profit margin of anyone in big tech. It's over 50%. A gross margin, which quickly equates to profit margin, 50%. For him to pull that maneuver and take money off his balance sheet, invest, he then is both getting to mark that same cash as revenue that then will absolutely cause his market cap to jump, which if he needed to fundraise more would be at that heightened valuation, which would then give him a discount on the exact money that he needs to give OpenAI in theory. And then the real genius is he's then forcing OpenAI to pay not his costs of goods sold, how much it costs him to make a chip all in, but double because he has a 50% gross margin. So it's effectively him. In a way, you could make the case investing in OpenAI 50% below market because of that 50% gross margin difference. It's so smart. He's basically, another way to put it is he's giving OpenAI 50 cents and now saying, okay, now pay me back $1. As well, there's a case to be made that with OpenAI's lead, 700 million active users, an absolute domination on the consumer segment, near ubiquity. When you say OpenAI, it's like the Kleenex example, or the Tylenol. That's a proprietary brand who is branded so well that their name is ubiquitous with the entire product line. There's a case to be made, especially with the way that AI is going to change autonomous vehicles and robotics, that what Jensen's now has a major stake in, 20% stake. The bullish analysts say that OpenAI has line of sight to being $1 trillion company soon, and then a 2 to 3 trillion after that. So not only is his markup, because if he's buying in at that $500 billion range, if you're taking a 2 trillion, he gets a 4x markup. But because of that gross margin, you can make the case it's an 8x on his investment in the near term. We could be just a mere 2 or 3 years away from that valuation, if not sooner. Jensen's smart because he's the chip guy. He isn't the end application layer in the way that OpenAI is. So for him to get that kind of exposure, it's bright. It's super bright. At the same time that he then is guaranteeing a multi-year sale order, which Wall Street loves, and pushing out any possibility of his competitors like AMD or TSMC coming up with chips that could actually compete. Once again, it's a masterstroke. It's super, super bright. Now, though, I think I want to switch gears because the real question here is this a bubble? Will 10 gigawatts, which just to put that into kind of context, 10 gigawatts, that's enough electricity for 7.5 million homes. 7.5 million homes. Once again, there's less than 50 gigawatts attributed to the entire data and cloud industry writ large across the US. 10 gigawatts. Is there going to be that kind of demand over the next 5 years in AI? That question, I would argue, is unequivocally yes. And I can't find any viable pundits who disagree. With the rate of AI adoption, with OpenAI's growth curves, it's all there. Makes a lot of sense. So then, if there will be demand for the 10 gigawatts, if Nvidia's chips remain on that cutting edge, what's the case for a bubble for the $100 billion investment to actually go down, not up? And from everything I'm reading and everything that I've understood about really the common denominator to the AI arms race, both amongst big tech players in the US, but most importantly, the US versus China, it's going to be energy. I said earlier, the fundamental building block is the GPUs. The fundamental building block, a layer below that, is the sheer energy demand. Pound for pound, chip for chip, or rack for rack in a data warehouse, an AI rack requires 10 to 15 times more energy than the traditional cloud computing that you and I are used to. Once again, another order of magnitude. I've seen analysts speculate that over a third of all new energy demands in the US will be to fuel the AI arms race. That's a really big deal. And then you add on the complexity of a 10 gigawatt build out. That's typically 10 nuclear reactors. That's like 50,000 acres. Oh, let me get this number right. I'm pretty sure it's 50,000 acres of solar, but that might be per gigawatt. That might be 500,000. It's just assume massive, massive, massive amount of energy. 7.5 million homes. Whew. So here's where my mind goes. The way that this could be a bubble is that these big tech players build out the compute, the chips, the inference and training needs, and they can't fuel it. The energy isn't there. That is the primary reality that I actually get nervous about. And then, appropriately, folks that are, like myself, very aware of the climate, the stakes of our climate crisis, see that right now from an administrative standpoint in Washington, there is an intentional gutting of especially things like wind and solar, and a lot of talk about nuclear, but there's such low-hanging fruit on how to reform the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. There's such low-hanging fruit, and really most of the build-outs are going towards natural gas, unfortunately coal, just these massive carbon emitters. Whereas 10 gigawatts, it's such a huge demand that from the analysis that I'm reading, no matter what, in order to reach that ludicrous of a number, you can't throw one energy form factor at it. You need to combine. It can't just be natural gas. God willing, it's nuclear and renewables being the larger proportion. But I think that's the element that when you peel all these layers back, when I really answer, what does this mean for the big tech players? But what does this mean for you, me, and the rest of Americans? It is that this is actually a big step towards the U.S. maintaining a lead, a supremacy in the AI arms race, which is mission critical. That has implications on national security, on education, on healthcare, like every imaginable sector, robotics. And then the next layer down is that for projects of this scope, that typically means a net new 250,000 Americans employed. 250,000. That's not a small ball. That changes cities and states in a way that helps 250,000 new Americans achieve the American dream at exciting salaries with exciting upward mobility. Like it's actually really powerful stuff at an exact point where the young generation is going to be struggling more and more with unemployment and a degree of hopelessness about the inability to capture the American dream. It's well timed. So that part of me as a patriot is cheering, saying, hey, let's build. We need this. But then that last part, just circling all the way back, and this is kind of my closing argument, is it's a fork in the road. 10 gigawatts, that starts to set the trajectory. If that's all just nat gas, the carbon implications are spooky. Whereas there are both cost benefits to renewables, there are initial commitments by the big tech players to double down on renewables. Google has a commitment by 2030 that all of their AI demands will be fueled by renewable energy, nuclear, solar, wind. But I really beseech each of us to think through, wow, wherever you land on the climate crisis, arguing about the climate crisis really hasn't made that much progress in the US for a generation now, if not more. But arguing about AI supremacy, job creation, maintaining a lead on China are like primary AI competitor. That's pretty bipartisan and unequivocally important. So all of a sudden, these arguments around, whoa, Microsoft investing in small modular reactors and nuclear that actually can get spun up far quicker, far more cheaply, and can actually plug right into states' baseload power right where power plants were, which is so powerful. Basically, take a coal plant and how it's plugged in. Just think of like all the outlets in your house except for an entire state. You can drop an SMR and immediately turn on indefinite baseload power without the intermittency of solar or wind in ways that Republicans traditionally argue. And all of a sudden, 10 of those, and you've changed the AI arms race, you've employed 200,000 people, and you've avoided the AI bubble from popping because you've actually allowed big tech to meet and supply the demands for AI training and inference. Like really, really important high-stakes stuff. So it's just interesting to me that here we are talking about Nvidia, and folks primarily arguing, bubble. They're idiots. They're crazy. These numbers are insane. And I'm like, no, rational characters. But what really, when you peel back the layers, what really matters is, geez, can they supply the energy they need? And what kind of energy will they be incentivized to seek after? What will the regulatory landscape look like? I'd love to do, and I'm thinking about doing a show sometime soon on all of the reforms that could be enacted quickly to the NRC to make nuclear so much quicker and more accessible. Right now in the US, we have been stuck with about 100 reactors for 30 years, going on 40 years. China is going from 50 to 200 this decade. We're going to fall behind. So that's my rallying cry right now is look at the energy behind the gigawatts. Where is it coming from? And how, from a policy standpoint, can we actually empower our best innovators to win the arms race with energy sources that help us maintain that lead and not be reliant on nat gas that we're going to end up having to import from our adversaries and find ourselves in a whole nother bind. So anyway, thanks for listening. That's my like off the cuff, just for memory, kind of deep dive on the headline of the day and what I think are the most important implications behind it. All right. Thanks for listening.